It's 9:14 p.m. on November 22nd, 1987. Thousands of televisions across Chicago are tuned into WGN's local sports recap. Without warning, the screen goes black. The analog signal hasn't dropped. It has been taken by force. For 15 seconds, viewers are subjected to a grating, metallic buzz and the bouncing image of a man wearing a rubber Max Headroom mask. And just 2 hours later, he would strike again. When we think of hackers today, we picture lines of code, stolen passwords, and digital footprints. But in the 1980s, hacking was physical. It involved massive amounts of hardware, deep engineering knowledge, and sheer audacity. The Max Headroom broadcast intrusion remains one of the most unsettling and technically impressive unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. After the first 15-second intrusion on WGN, station engineers panicked. They frantically changed the frequency of their studio transmitter link, successfully kicking the hijacker off the air. The city took a collective breath, assuming it was a bizarre, one-off prank. But the intruder was simply recalibrating. At 11:15 p.m., PBS affiliate WTTW was broadcasting a heavily watched episode of Doctor Who. Suddenly, the screen warped with scan lines. The audio dissolved into a static hum. Max Headroom was back. For 90 agonizing seconds, the hijacker controlled the signal. The audio was heavily distorted, a mechanical voice groaning out disconnected phrases. He referenced local Chicago shock jokes, hummed the theme to Clutch Cargo, and ended the broadcast with a disturbing sequence involving a fly swatter before the screen finally snapped back to normal. To understand just how terrifying this event was, you have to understand how impossible it should have been. In 1987, television networks transmitted their studio signals to massive antennas at the top of the Sears Tower or the John Hancock Center via analog microwave links. To take over a broadcast, this individual didn't just tap into a line. They utilized a phenomenon known as the capture effect. If an FM receiver is fed two signals on the same frequency, it will lock onto the stronger one and completely ignore the weaker one. To put it simply, the hijacker had to blast a microwave signal so incredibly powerful that it crushed the WTTW's multi-million-dollar studio transmission right out of the sky. The hardware required to do this was massive, expensive, and incredibly obvious. Experts estimated the hijacker needed tens of thousands of dollars worth of transmission gear, a massive parabolic dish, and a direct line of sight to the receivers on top of the tallest buildings in the world. This wasn't a teenager in a basement. This was a broadcast engineer with a vendetta. By Monday morning, this was no longer a local prank. It was a federal crime. Hijacking a broadcast signal violated severe FCC regulations, and the FBI immediately stepped in to launch a massive manhunt. Agents swept the city looking for rogue transmission dishes. They analyzed a corrugated metal panel spinning behind the hijacker, hoping to match it to a local warehouse. They ran acoustic analysis on garbled audio. They chased down leads for months, but the trail was entirely cold. With no physical evidence, the investigation gave way to decades of theories. The most logical official conclusion was the inside job. Many investigators believed the culprit had to be a disgruntled former employee of WGN or WTTW. Someone who knew exactly what frequencies the studio transmitter links were using and exactly when the engineers would be the most vulnerable. But every employee interrogated had an airtight alibi. The most compelling lead didn't come from the FBI. It came from the internet decades later. In a massive, now deleted Reddit thread, a user claiming to be part of the 1980s Chicago hacker underground pointed the finger at two brothers, referred to only as J and K. The user claimed J had severe autism but possessed a savant-level genius for broadcast electronics. The brothers allegedly had access to the exact, highly expensive hardware needed to overpower the Sears Tower transmission. The user even claimed that Jay matched the exact physical build of the man in the rubber mask, and that the bizarre, disconnected humming of the Clutch Cargo theme song perfectly aligned with Jay's specific hyperfixations. For a few weeks, the internet was convinced the case was correct, but as amateur sleuths pressed the original poster for hard proof, the user panicked, retracted the story, and vanished from the platform. Another prominent suspect that investigators and internet sleuths have focused on is Eric Fournier. Fournier was an artist and musician who later became infamous for creating deeply unsettling, surreal internet series, Chez St. John. In 1987, Fournier was living in the Midwest, heavily involved in the underground punk scene, and possessed the exact brand of chaotic, anti-establishment humor displayed during the broadcast. Proponents of this theory argue that the Max Headroom hijacking was simply an early, aggressive art piece by Fournier. However, he passed away in 2010, taking any potential confession with him to the grave. Today, an analog hack of this scale is virtually impossible. Digital encryption and modern broadcast infrastructure have closed the door on this era of signal piracy. The Max Headroom broadcast intrusion remains an isolated, bizarre anomaly locked forever in the year 1987. The perpetrators achieved exactly what they set out to do. They hijacked the attention of a city, embarrassed federal investigators, and vanished without a trace into the static. Whoever was behind that rubber mask has held on to their secret for over 35 years. And as the decades pass, it becomes more and more likely that we will never know their true identity.